Hello, everyone. This is Ace, and this is the second episode of this channel, Ace the Exam, and at the same time, the first episode of this channel in the section of GRE for reading comprehension or RC for the sake of brevity, which is mostly known among students and learners. I launched this channel because I felt something significant related to education missing among other similar instructional channels and informative videos, and that was analyzing word by word and sentence by sentence. Other similar educational channels fail to take the hands of learners and guide them to read a passage word by word and sentence by sentence and gain the meaning line between lines, between sentences where questions are raised. They are usually engaged in teaching some know-hows and technical issues, but they are not enough for acing an exam. So, with this in mind, I launched this channel, and now I'm going to begin this episode. But before beginning, I would like to mention an old Chinese saying: if you give a man a fish, he will eat for a day, but if you teach a man two fish, he will eat for a lifetime. Now they begin to read this passage. Sentence 1. Although social learning, which is the acquisition of specific behaviors by observing other individuals exhibiting those behaviors, is well documented among fish, few studies have investigated social learning within a developmental context in these taxa. In this sentence, we have a parenthesis. This parenthesis offers further information to explain what social learning is. If you encountered such a parenthesis in your passage, you can ignore it for the time being and read the sentence without the parentheses. And after reading the sentence completely, you can go back and incorporate that information into your perception of the sentence to gain a better understanding of the sentence. The main verb in the sentence is this verb phrase, have investigated. Main verbs help us to understand the meaning of sentences, and the clause preceding is a subordinating clause beginning with the subordinating conjunction of although, belonging to the category of concession and comparison. The other begins the sentence while making a concession. The other actually acknowledges that social learning among fish is well studied and is well documented, but few studies have investigated social learning within a developmental context. Context here means environment, means setting, developmental environment, developmental context in this taxa. And if you encounter such exotic words like taxa, you should not be daunted. No, don't be frightened, because the meaning of taxa, knowing the meaning of taxa, does not help you much. And you can guess the meaning of taxa from placing the word fish alongside this noun phrase, developmental context. And you can guess what taxa means. Taxa means kinds of fish, because fish here is not a singular word, it is a plural word. And fish in the plural form is still the same for the singular form, the same fish. Taxa here is Latin plural. This is a Latin rooted word, and its singular form is taxon. And taxon means a group of animal or a group of plants sharing certain features, certain attributes. And when we want to make taxon plural, it turns into taxa. This is a common rule in making plural in Latin rooted words, that we drop on and replace it with a. For example, we have phenomenon, which turns into phenomena when it becomes plural. Okay. So according to the sentence, we understood that social learning is well studied among fish, but studies being done, studies as to social learning of fish being done within a developmental context among fish is rare. You know, it is rare that researchers have studied social learning among fish by observing them, by studying them within their developmental environment. As for what comes in the parentheses, the word acquisition is interesting. It comes from the verb acquire. Please pay attention to acquire, the word see, and don't mistakenly drop it when you spell this word when you write it. Don't write it in this way, acquire, because it is incorrect. And when you write acquisition, again, please see between A and Q. Exhibit here means show, demonstrate. Sentence 2. Rather than investigating the development of a particular skill, Chapman, Ward, and Krauss investigated the role of group density during development in later foraging success in laboratory-housed guppies. The main verb here in the sentence is investigated. The sentence begins with this subordinating clause, and rather than is a subordinating conjunction belonging to the category of comparing and concession. And what is cloudy here is this word, guppies. You know, from this adjective, laboratory, housed, you can guess what guppy is. Certainly, guppy is a kind of fish, because this is a fish that is housed in laboratory, and the passage is talking about fish and their social learning. And up till now, we know that social learning has not been studied in the developmental environment of fish, and rather than investigating a particular skill, researchers like Chapman, Ward, and Krauss investigated the role of group density during the development of guppies, and not wild guppies, but laboratory housed guppies. Sentence 3. When raised with a small number of conspecifics in the parentheses, it has been explained what conspecifics means. Guppies were quicker to locate food by following a trained adult guppy than were guppies raised in large groups. So this sentence tells us guppies in small groups can locate food better than large groups, and in small groups they follow an adult guppy, and this way they locate food. Sentence 4. This counterintuitive finding, this here is a demonstrative pronoun, refers to this finding that guppies are quicker to locate food by following a trained adult guppy in a small group than in a large group. And this is a counterintuitive phenomenon, and this counterintuitive finding is explained by the fact that it's explained here is the main verb. This counterintuitive finding is explained by the fact that guppies reared in the high density condition were less likely to show. It means to swim in a group, to show with others, and therefore were less likely to learn the benefits of social learning. So here, reared means ground or raised, to be brought up. So guppies reared in the high density condition were less likely to show with others and therefore were less likely to learn the benefits of social learning. So this sentence states that the larger the size of the group, the less likely for the guppies to learn and to show, to form a group, and to learn and understand the benefits of this social learning. Sentence 5. Instead, fish reared in high-density situations may learn that conspecifics was explained here, members of the same species. Conspecifics are to be viewed as competitors rather than as potential source of adaptive information. In this sentence, fish here means guppy. This is the general way to refer to guppy. And reared in high density situations is a restrictive, restrictive clause. Without this clause, we don't know what kind of fish. A fish reared in high density situations. This is essential to know when we read the sentence, what kind of fish. So instead, fish reared in high density situations may learn. This is the verb phrase, and actually it is the main verb of the sentence. May learn that conspecifics are to be viewed as competitors rather than as potential sources of adaptive information. This sentence states that in high density communities, guppies think of others as their competitors, not as a potential source of knowledge to learn from. Sentence 6. This finding suggests that, at least for guppies, the early social environment may have an effect on the capacity for social learning, if not on the socially learned behaviors themselves. In this sentence, this is a demonstrative pronoun, and this finding refers to this clause in the preceding sentence. This finding that guppies reared in high-density society see others as their competitors and not a potential source to learn from. This is the finding, and what does this finding suggest? It suggests that if the early social environment, at least for guppies, does not have any effect on behaviors, or if this Putin makes it difficult for you to remember the phrase or understand the phrase, you can eliminate the adjective for the time being. You can just simply say behaviors instead of socially learned behaviors. So, if the early social environment, at least for guppies, does not have any effect on behaviors themselves, it has certainly effect on the social learning. And the sentence implies this connotation, at least for guppies. But by mentioning at least for guppies, the sentence means that this may function for the rest of fish, for other types of fish. So according to this sentence, we find that early socially environment may have effect on behaviors, and definitely it has effects on social learning. as we understood that in large groups, guppies see others as competitors, not a potential source to learn from. And in a small groups, they can learn better. For example, in a small group, they can follow an adult to locate food, and they can in a small group they can form a shoal. Question one: the primary purpose of the passage is to option one, option B, C, D, and E. This question is the primary purpose question, which is a common kind of question on the GRE exam. And this question asks you to mention the primary purpose of the passage. What is the primary purpose of the passage? And like the TOEFL exam and the reading section, your general strategy for answering GRE questions should be rejecting incorrect choices rather than isolating and finding the correct one. But the primary purpose of each passage is usually mentioned in the first sentences of that passage. And that first sentences function like a beacon to guide you find the primary purpose of the passage. So I think we should go back to the passage and read the first sentences of the passage. But in the real exam, you should always read the first sentences completely and remember what was the primary purpose. Okay, we go back to the passage, and here in the first sentence, read that although social learning is well documented among fish, is well documented means is well studied among fish, few studies have investigated social learning within a developmental context in these taxa. Few studies here, this combination means we have a dearth of studies investigating social learning within a developmental environment of fish. So this sentence means that in the following we are going to we have a dearth of a particular study. This is a particular study. Actually, you're studying the social learning of fish within its developmental setting, developmental environment is a particular study. And in the following, this sentence means in the following we are going to read about this study or read about such an study. The first option is the primary purpose of the passage to note a flaw in a scientific finding? No, the passage does not mention a flaw in a scientific study, but the passage says that we need a particular study, we need a specific study, and that study is to study the social learning of fish within its environment, within its developmental environment. So we find that there is no flaw in a scientific finding, and the passage does not discuss any flaw. So this option is rejected. Choice B, to describe a particular scientific study. Is this the primary purpose of the passage? It seems so because it is in accordance with the passage. Let us go back to the passage. You see, in the first sentence, we read that social learning is well studied among fish. However, few studies have investigated social learning within a developmental context in these taxa. So this is an introduction for what we have in the following. In the following, we are going to have a particular study, and this study is investigating social learning of guppies within their developmental environment. And in the following in sentence 2, we read that rather than investigating the development of a particular skill, Chapman, Ward, and Krauss investigated the role of a group density during development and later foraging success in laboratory housed guppies. So this sentence actually solidifies our initial perception about the purpose of the passage. This is a specific study in which researchers, rather than investigating the development of a particular skill, have investigated the role of group density during development and later foraging success in guppies. So it is indeed a particular study, and it seems that choice B is the correct option. But in order to make sure, we need to check the remaining options and reject them if we find them incorrect. Option C. Is the primary purpose of the passage to present an interpretation of a finding? No, this is not the main purpose of the passage, but this is a purpose, a secondary purpose of the passage. Because in the passage, the author mentions a finding, and the finding is that guppies learn less when they develop in a high density society in comparison with when they develop in a small society. And its interpretation is that in a large society, guppies see their fellows as their competitors, not source of knowledge to learn from. But this is not the primary purpose of the passage. It is actually it is a finding that comes from a particular study, and that study is to investigate the social learning of fish within its developmental environment. And the other wants to mention that this study is so important, and mention an example of such a study and its interpretation. So C is not the primary purpose, but it is a purpose of the passage, and obviously it is rejected. Is the primary purpose of the passage to note a difference between two scientific findings? No, this is obviously rejected because in the passage we just discussed only one scientific findings, and there were no two scientific findings to discuss. So this is obviously rejected. Choice E. To contrast two conditions in which a particular phenomenon has been observed. Is this the primary purpose of the passage? No, because the author of the passage draws a contrast between two conditions: the condition of high density guppy society and low density guppy society, to draw its conclusion. And the conclusion is that the social learning of guppies is reduced when they are reared in a high density society in comparison with the case that they are reared in a low density society. And this contrast functions like a means for the other to get its result. And so this is obvious that this contrast is not the primary purpose of the passage. This is just a tool, a means. And more importantly, the result I just mentioned itself is not the primary purpose of the passage. At best, it can be the secondary purpose of the passage. The primary purpose of the passage is the option B, to describe a particular scientific study, and that scientific study is that it investigates social learning of fish within their developmental environment. This is what makes this study particular, and the passage mentions such an example and its result and observation and interpretation. So the answer to question one is option B, to describe a particular scientific study. Question two, regarding research and fish, it can be inferred from the passage that. So this is an inference question. We should infer information from sentences. We should infer something that is not explicitly suggested in the passage. So I think we should read the options, we should check them, and before that, again, I mentioned our general strategy that was to reject the incorrect options rather than isolate the correct one. Choice A, research studies of the acquisition of important skills by fish have only recently begun to document the role of conspecifics in the learning process. No, this option is clearly incorrect because in the passage you cannot find any sentence or sentences pointing to the role of conspecifics in the learning process as recently been documented. You cannot infer such a thing being recently documented, the state of being recently documented for the role of conspecifics in the learning process. So we reject this option and go for checking the remaining ones. Choice B, research on social learning in guppies suggests that guppies differ in important ways from most other fish in the means by which they learn particular skills. The difference between guppies and other kinds of fish in terms of learning skills, learning particular skills, as the choice suggests, has not been mentioned. Moreover, in the last sentence, we read that this finding suggests that at least for guppies, the early social environment may have an effect on the capacity for social learning, if not on the socially learned behaviors themselves. So it suggests that the effect of social environment on social learning and social behavior can be found for other groups of fish, other types of fish other than guppies. So we see that this is the only point that the passage talks about guppies and other kinds of fish, and we don't see any difference between guppies and other fish. Actually, the passage tries to draw a parallel between guppies and other kinds of fish in terms of their environment and its effect, in terms of the effects of their environment, their social environment, on their social learning and social behaviors. So this option is clearly rejected. Choice C, research on social learning in fish has generally focused on the acquisition of skills other than foraging. This option is clearly incorrect because in the passage there has not been cited any focus for studying social learning among fish, and moreover, in that particular study mentioned in the passage, we read that foraging is kind of foraging or equally searching for food, finding food, is a kind of social behavior that young guppies in a low density society can learn from their adults. They can, for example, locate food by following adults. So this option is clearly rejected because foraging has not been excluded from the study of social learning among fish. Choice D. Research has established that social learning occurs in some fish species without investigating the developmental context in which it occurs. This option seems in accordance with the information we absorbed from the passage because in the first sentence we read, social learning is well documented or well studied among fish. However, few studies have investigated social learning within a developmental context in these taxa. So now a question is raised. How has well-studiedness of social learning been possible to researchers when they have not been entailed to study social behavior of fish, social learning of fish within their developmental environment? Perhaps for some species of fish, you don't need to study social. You don't. If you want to study their social learning, you don't need to study their social learning within their developmental environment. So this is exactly what choice D says. Choice D actually says social learning occurs in some species of fish without investigating the developmental context in which it occurs. That's true. And this is the candidate for our answer. We have still another option left to check. This is option D, and after checking this, we can certainly, if we reject option E, we can certainly choose option D for an answer to this question. Option E, research to investigate social learning has been done more extensively on fish than on other aquatic animals. This is not a kind of information we can infer from this passage because in the passage, except for fish, we have not read something about other aquatic animals, and then the passage does not discuss animals other than fish. So we cannot judge about this statement. We cannot infer this. We cannot infer this statement. So clearly we can reject it because in the passage we only discuss fish, and the passage does not mention any information, does not offer any information for a species other than fish, like the rest of aquatic animals. So the option E is clearly rejected, and the answer to this question is option D. Question 3. Which of the following can be inferred about the study by Chapman, Ward, and Krauss? Again, this is an inference question that we should infer from the passage, from the sentences, one or more sentences. Okay, we begin to check the options. Choice A, it was initially designed to investigate something other than social learning. This option seems correct, and this keyword initially persuaded me to accept it. But let me go back to the passage and check this option from the sentences. In sentence 2, we read that rather than investigating the development of a particular skill, Chapman, Ward, and Krauss investigated the role of group density during development in later foraging success in laboratory-housed guppies. This sentence suggests that the researchers shifted their focus from studying a particular skill, perhaps this is a social skill, to the role of group density during development of guppies, during development in later foraging success in laboratory-housed guppies. While their initial purpose on the surface was not to study a social skill, but studying social learning is the underlying motivation for these researchers because they wanted to study the role of group density, or better, the effect of group density during development in later foraging success in laboratory housed guppies. You know, they had this initial perception of foraging as a kind of skill, and they wanted to gauge the effect of group density in the development of foraging success among guppies. So it seems that studying social learning is still the primary motivation of these researchers, while on the surface and initially they shifted their focus from studying a particular social skill. All right, um, we can keep this option as a candidate for an answer, however, regarding what I said, but we can keep continuing checking other options to see at last whether or not this option can be this candidate can be the final answer to this question. Choice B. It required researchers to observe individual guppies at multiple points in their lifespans. Like option A, this option seems correct, but there is a considerable degree of certainty to the correctness of this option because let me go back to the passage in sentence 2 here. We read that Chapman, Ward, and Krauss investigated the role of group density during development in later foraging success in laboratory house groups. This is the keyword, later foraging success in laboratory house groups. Okay, they raised guppies in two different conditions in a high density society and in a low density society, and then they again observed them later in their lifespans to check how successful they are in their foraging. And in other sentences also we can read about this. Reared in Fish reared in high density situations may learn that specifics are to be viewed as competitors. This is the past tense. Fish that are reared. So it means that initially they are reared in two different conditions, and here in a high density situation. And later they observe them again, and they can see their conspecifics as their competitors. So all these pieces of information imply that Chapman, Ward, and Krauss observed. Let me go back to option B. Observed individual guppies at multiple points in their lifespans. So this option seems correct, and seems correct more than option A, and we still continue checking the remaining options. Choice C. It pointed to the possibility that population density may have little to do with guppies' social learning. Oh God, this option is wholly against what exactly Chapman, Ward, and Krauss concluded in the research. Actually, in the research, they did use that population density plays a pivotal role in the guppies' social learning. So this option is clearly rejected. Choice D. It required the observation of guppies under conditions that closely mimicked the conditions of guppies in the wild. According to the passage, we read that guppies were laboratory housed, and they were reared in two different conditions, in a high density situation and in a low density situation. And none of these conditions imply that the situation of reared guppies were like the situation, the real situation in the wild. No. So this option again is rejected. Choice E. It indicated that guppies gain adaptive information from being reared with a relatively large number of conspecifics. Oh God, no! This option is wholly against what Chapman, Ward, and Krauss concluded in their research. No, here go back to the sentence. We read that fish reared in high density situations may learn that conspecifics are to be viewed as competitors rather than as potential source of adaptive information. Rather than makes concession, makes actually and makes a comparison, and we understand that fish reared in high density situations see their conspecifics as their competitors rather than as potential sources of adaptive information. So this option here, option E, is incorrect. And we choose option B as the correct one. This is the correct option.